I just wanted to first thank Reverend Smith for this beautiful church and gathering place of solidarity and militancy for our movements. Thanks so much to Jobs with Justice for building community and labor alliances. But especially thank you to the students and faculty and staff of so many of our higher education institutions. I totally agree that if institutions fail to create relevant and democratic education that's community-based, that we should change those systems with something new. And I think what's emerging out of these struggles led by faculty, courageous faculty, and courageous students is a new vision of education that should be about our community's upliftment and against displacement, and for really creating creative people that will make a better society for all of us, especially the 99%. And thank you so much for saying part of the struggle is identifying the enemy and really how we collectively support each other and put our foot on the throat of the 1%, as you said that. I think that's a critical thing. We're identifying the enemy in this gathering. I also wanted to say I taught at SF State for 16 years. I also helped to organize New College of California, so I totally identify with what the SFAI folks are dealing with and the victimization and the demonization that courageous faculty organizing are facing. As a member of the Board of Supervisors too, I wanted to thank Rafael Mandolin for being here, but I also wanted to say that we as government officials have to do everything we can to hold accountable institutions that are really squeezing the lowest paid staff and workers and really taking away this ideal of education that can make you a better servant and empowerment person from your community. So thank you to Jobs with Justice and all of you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here because I feel like I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. You know, everything that was said here about how it is that we as adjuncts teach, the mentoring, the production of ideas, the production of art that's relevant and that's focused on community, the way I was raised. You know, I was politically raised here in the Bay Area, from Sacramento, but politically raised here in the Bay Area. I just saw Juliana and she says, "Where do I know you from?" And I said, "Brigada Venceremos in the Communist Party." You know, that's where I know you from. And I'll say that out loud here, even though, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't, but I'll say it here because of this. Yes, it's important to identify the enemy, but it's also important to have a strategy, to have an analysis, to have a politic. And it doesn't have to have a name, a particular name or whatever, but I do miss it. I do miss having a perspective that's clear. Because what does have a perspective and clarity at this moment is the incorporation of our education system and the loss, the privatization of our schooling. This is clearly has a perspective, clearly going on, and it's convincing our students as well that somehow what they're experiencing is not a planned experience. There's a plan here. It's been going on since the cutbacks in Proposition 13, since I was a young woman. There's a plan here. There's a plan here to eliminate people of color who are now in majority. I remember that as a young person growing up in Sacramento and going to the Capitol and finding that my community was missing in their master plan, that there was no future for my community, that it did not exist. I saw that plan in the lack of funding in our park systems and our recreation systems. And these many, 45, 50 years later, I have to say that, you know, yes, I made it through institutional learning. I am now an adjunct professor. I have an MFA in art. I have a BA in art and ethnic studies. And none of my children have gone to school. Within one generation, my daughter, who had children like I did, was not able to go to school because she had and was not a first-generation college goer. As if generational wealth does not influence. I feel, you know, that I'm speaking this way because I see and I look out here and I think to us, I see our age, I see what we know, I see what we've experienced. And I think it's important for us to have some kind of response, you know, that has language that can actually address the real issues. Because I see the change. I see the loss in my classrooms. I am working and I am not getting paid. I continue to work and support students and mentor students. I do all the work that's required of me, and my pay is probably about $1 an hour at this point. The pay influences my family, influences what we are able to do. I have children and great-grandchildren. I am not self-supporting. I have debt. I owe institutional debt loans that have accumulated, and I've never even touched the principal. I'm still paying the interest. They tell me I'm going to be paying this after I die, that they will take my Social Security from my family. So that's why I'm speaking this way. Because I feel without a politic, a direction, an analysis, a clear understanding of what really is going on here, I don't exactly know how we're going to organize a response other than on an emotional basis. Thank you.
So I am really angry, and I'm also really hopeful. As Celia touched on, this is an issue that's interconnected. So the loss of middle class in this country, the fact that Latino students are now a majority in public school systems in California, the fact that even in San Francisco, that there's been entering of people of color and women into the workforce at the same time as there's been disinvestment in higher education. All those things are interconnected. But that also means that we have allies. It means that folks who are supporting the cause of working conditions for teachers and faculty in higher education are the same people like me who are working with kids in our public schools. They're people who are supporting women and people of color. They're immigrants' rights folks. They're people who are working to get Latinos to get out and vote. All of these folks are part of our movement. They're natural allies. And I'm hoping that this is the beginning of an end where we draw the line in the sand of creating a future for ourselves, for our children, for the America that will be tomorrow, and that we're angry and that we're hopeful, that we will get together and connect all these dots and make sure that everyone is at the table to demand these basic rights for you today, but also for my kids and my grandkids who are going to be entering this workforce. So thank you for putting this together into AFT 2121 and to the labor movement for still fighting for things that we should have gotten 40, 50 years ago and are still fighting for today. Thank you.
I don't think the stool is high enough for me. My name is Cherrie Moraga, and I teach in the belly of the beast at Stanford University. And I think what I want is, I've been there almost 20 years. I have a really, really good position. I'm called an artist in residence, and I was hired for a 5-year renewable appointment, which when I was hired in the 90s, I grabbed my partner and I said, let's buy a house, let's do everything, let's get all the medical care taken care of, let's do everything, because in 5 years we'll have nothing. And that was almost 20 years ago. What I want to say about that position is that it's a renewable appointment, and one day some allies in my department, which are few, asked me if I wanted tenure and would I like to get out of this situation of not knowing every 5 years whether I was going to be hired. And I said, no, because I was free. What I mean by that is I have children, grandchildren. Celia's my partner. I was free to be a teacher. I got to teach people how to make art. I got to see, and I'm not talking, my students tend to self-select at Stanford. I get mostly queer students and students of color, working class students. By and large, as the majority of my students, and I see how they found a place to be able, not to necessarily be artists, but to find a life of expression. And that their art practice also had to do with a critical thinking that made them be able to walk as members of this world. And that, 40 years ago when I went to school, that's, as a first generation student, that's what I imagined education was about. They got it. But institutionally, the place is everything we do not want, in the sense that it is absolutely about privilege. It is absolutely about taking a handful of those kids, 40,000 and under, those kids get full rides through Stanford. If you have a family income of 40,000 and under, you got a full ride. I'm going to ignore that for a minute because I know people who talk less. And what I want to say about that is that's all it's about. It's about the exception to the rule. It's not about changing the rule. And also I see what happens to graduate students at Stanford. I see them die. I have seen 2 native students and 3 Chicanos suicide because of that kind of competitive education. It is not the model we want. It is about corporation. It is about capital. That is exclusively what that university is about. And people like me get to be the little exception. I'm no fool. But all I can do in the minute that I'm in that class with those kids, 10 weeks is like a blink. Maybe I can teach them the difference between freedom and free enterprise, which is completely conflated at Stanford. Do I really have a minute? I have 30 seconds. I think I just want to say that you never forget. I mean, the one thing also I was asked in my department was to integrate my department, which is very Eurocentric. And because all of my people were only taking my classes as they put it to me, and I told them, no, that the job of a Eurocentric department was to change itself. I wasn't there to do that, and if I tried to do that, I would be a very bad teacher. And I went home and I told my partner, I said, pack it up, because the job is over. Because I told the head honcho, no. And I didn't lose the job. But the truth of the matter is what I learned from that moment is you have to, even when you have privilege, be willing to lose the job. And luckily I had a family and a partnership in which that was okay, where they said to me, okay, we'll figure it out. And so there is a relationship to what privilege is also having a relationship to free choice, which most of what we're talking about tonight has not been allowed the majority of people in this room and all the people we represent. Thank you.
First, I want to also thank the organizers and all of the folks who provided testimony tonight and everyone on the panel. I think I would echo the sentiments in the room that this has been an incredibly powerful evening, and I feel deeply privileged to have been here and to have borne witness to the testimony tonight. I think that my initial response whenever I think about this issue, and especially tonight, is what kind of sickness has come across our city, our society, when we would dismantle the very thing that is the source of our prosperity, when we would attack the very people who are most essential, our educators. I think that there's something deeply wrong at the core when we're having a conversation of people who are undermined, who are under attack, who should be celebrated and elevated and supported. In this city, especially, the amount of wealth in this city, that we would be having this conversation here in this very place, where blocks from now they're renting one-bedroom apartments for $7,000, selling millions of dollar condos, that we wouldn't support our young people to have a future in the city. I think there can be nothing more shameful than that, and I think I share the deep anger that we heard tonight from the panel and from the speakers. Like many people in this room, I would not be where I am, I would not be who I am if it was not for public education and for public higher education. I was the son of, I guess, what you would call frequent flyer. My mom was a lecturer at SF State, as well as City College when I was growing up. We grew up in the East Bay, single parent family. She would commute across the bridge and back over to the East Bay. And actually, I was reflecting on tonight that she was actually teaching a class on October 17th, 1989, which was the earthquake. And I remember that vividly because I was separated from her, and we stayed up waiting for her. And that was also her birthday. I think that when I reflect on this issue, and especially as someone who works in public education, I think about the fact that this is all connected. My mom not only needed to get the support and security and wages so that she could support her family, she also needed to be sure that when she dropped me off at school, that system of public education was going to allow me to have every opportunity in the world, was going to have teachers who were well paid, who had the security to support me as a student. And so the connection between students and workers, faculty, community, I think is what the way that we need to move forward. I had the privilege a number of years ago to serve as the executive director of the UC Student Association, which is a statewide student union. And we had experienced not just 5 years of straight tuition increases, double tuition in 5 years. We had also seen wage cuts, salary cuts. Those things were happening together, and they were happening for very similar reasons. And so what we did was we brought together the Student Association with our union, ASME 3299, and our graduate student union, UAW 2865, and we said, from here on out, we're going to work together, we're going to stand together, we're going to disrupt the Regents meeting together, we're going to fight together. When you're under attack, we're under attack. And I think what you've seen, this was 5 years ago, and for the last 5 years there have been no tuition increases in the UC system. I think that if we want to talk about hope, that's the hope that I see in this room, where you see students doing chants of students, faculty, staff, community together. When we recognize that when we rise together, when we fall together, that's when I think we were most powerful. And I think we see that in the victories that all of you have won in your work, and the victories that I know that we'll win coming out of tonight together. So thank you again, and I appreciate being here.
Will this work if I speak from here? I was sharing with the panelists earlier, I came to this gathering with a couple of strong emotions. One was just feeling so honored, first of all, to have all of you here. What an amazing group. So honored, so grateful to have you here. So that was the overriding feeling, but I also felt very pissed off. Can I just say this? I felt really pissed off because I remember 20 years ago, I was a freeway flyer. And I came out of Berkeley with my bright, shiny PhD and was ready to set the world on fire. And the only jobs I could get were adjunct professors. And so I would start my day at San Jose State. That was my morning. And then I would get in a car and I'd drive to Santa Clara. And then later for evening classes, I'd be in Berkeley. And I'd end the day absolutely exhausted. And I did that for 4 years, and the most money I made in any one of those years was $14,000. $14,000 with no benefits and no job security, just going from semester to semester. And my husband and I decided, we'd like to have a family. we'd like to have a home, nothing fancy, but just some stuff, for our kid, raise our kid. And so I had to make regrettably, the unfortunate decision, very sad decision, to leave academia. And what put it over the top for me was one day I was running off the Xerox machine. I guess we don't call them Xerox machines anymore, but anyway, it shows you how old I am. But I was running off copies for my students, handouts. And the department chair came in and he said, well, Richard, we just had budget cutbacks. And so from now on, you have to pay for your own handouts that you give your students. And I said, dude, you're barely paying me enough money to run my car to get here, and now I got to buy my own handouts. But I knew then, and what it came down to was just a sense of, my own self-respect. Just my own sense of dignity as a creature made in God's image. And this is not how God intended for me or any of the others to be treated. And so that kind of put it over the top. That was, I guess, my tipping point, that moment. But I've thought about it many times since then. Why was it so? There were no unions available to help me at the time, people like me. And I kept wondering, why was it so hard for us as adjuncts, there were a number of us, to get together and to raise our voices? And I think there were a couple of reasons. One was just, when we're all flying up and down the freeway all the time, it's hard to get a critical mass together to even have a conversation. So there's a structural problem. But I think there was even a deeper problem than that. Maybe a cultural problem, a problem of the soul. And that was, I think, that each one of us carried a very profound sense of shame. This is my fault. And I remember talking to faculty members, my mentors at Berkeley, saying, well, Richard, look, you got an awesome PhD, you got a book published, you got articles published in journals, great reviews in all of your classes, and you can't land a stable position? Something wrong with you, dude. That's the message, and it was cultivated. And I think all of us, I find when I was talking to other adjuncts, just that sense of, I must have screwed up here. This is my problem. It's not your problem. It is not your problem. Okay? And that's what I think that's a very deep cultural problem that we have to wrestle with, if we're going to be successful organizing. So one last thing is just, I'm a priest, so I got to say this. From an ethical standpoint, this sucker is a slam dunk. This is simply a matter of basic human dignity. And I'm so glad that Pope Francis is repeatedly speaking about this. Especially, it's not just an option anymore, organizing. It is absolutely essential, especially with the growing inequality. Absolutely essential. And this is one of the first and foremost places that it has to happen. My church, I'm happy to say, the Episcopalians, we're coming through with, pushing for the $15, minimum wage and all these other things. I'm pretty happy with what we've done. This is good. And so I hope you're among friends, and we're all in this together. We got to do this. So thank you.
The Anglicans are the parents of the Methodists, and we're good with a lot of social justice stuff. We're bad with the LGBTQ matters. I'm here today largely because of the influence of mentors and professors. I became radicalized in seminary when my view of scripture was changed because of my professors. This is also something personal because my mother was a high school teacher. Although I did not grow up working class, my dad had his own business. I went to private schools the whole time, run by the church. And so now as a clergy, I try to be a traitor to my own class and continue to raise working class consciousness. It's difficult. But I'm very glad to live in a house where one of our collective members is a member of United Educators of San Francisco, and the other is a tenured faculty at San Jose State, so with CFA. So I do learn from them. And even as a clergy person, I always want to challenge this institution for its participation in systemic oppression of homophobia, transphobia, of racism. When I was an instructor in a university and seminary run by my church in the Philippines, I can't join a union because they said I'm clergy. So maybe I should go to the United Church of Canada. I think clergy are unionized. So maybe we could do that as well. Now, what I heard today that strikes at a lot of ethical values I hold dear is the fact that people should always come before profits. And I always say this every time. I heard low pay for rank and file, higher pay for administrators. This is actually one way for this corporate model to divide unions. And I heard this in one of our conversations as we planned this, that they would offer higher pay for tenured faculty, and then for those who are adjunct, they would give them lower standards. And they're supposed to vote on a lousy contract. I'm even really struggling with the idea of a contract, because a contract really, out of respect, of course, to my union sisters and brothers who are here, a contract is really capital's way for you to sign something that says, we will continue to enslave you for a price. It is, that's how I see it. Anyway, this immoral system of treating education as a commodity and not as a right is rooted in the evils of a system that privileges, again, as I said earlier, capital and enslaves the working class. Therefore, it strikes at the heart of the dignity of people, whether you're a student or you're a faculty member or you're a teacher, because it's intertwined. What we see here, working together as jobs for justice, we see the intersections. I see that as a person of color, as an immigrant, and other people who are immigrants in this country. If this system is trying to dull the way we educate our children, people of color, people who can't afford to go to private schools, if this is their way, we need to stand up and fight that. Because we cannot be fodder for this, this wheel that will keep on churning and will just be put under it. We're not going to be part of that system. And that's really very difficult. Right now there's an attack on unions, and we've seen this, like somebody mentioned Scott Walker earlier. This is also happening in the way they're treating our unions, especially our teachers, as they bargain. Which brings me to the importance of solidarity. That's why we're here. That's why we're being asked to sign those cards. Sometimes I think, should I be here? Yeah, I do have ethical imperatives as a clergy person to be here. And all of us have reasons to be here. Maybe it's material. Or, maybe it's because we needed higher pay, we need support from people. But we are here because we are human beings that believe that all of us have a role to play in society. Not everybody can be a hand, not everybody's a foot, not everybody's an eye. When one part of our body hurts, we all hurt together. We all hurt together, and that's why we are here. Maya Angelou, poet and educator, said, "A wise woman wishes to be no one's enemy." But we've named the enemy today. But she adds, "A wise woman refuses to be anyone's victim." Tonight we refuse to be a victim, to be victims of a corporate model of running our educational institutions. We refuse to be that victim by standing up, by being here. We refuse to be a victim of inequality, of job insecurity, and of an unjust contract that's being foisted on us. We refuse to cower in fear like what victims are supposed to do, deprived of dignity and courage. For tonight we say, we will fight, we will struggle, we will stand together, for we demand jobs with justice. We have a right to have jobs with justice. We are jobs with justice. To our panel, thank you. Comrades, thank you for being here. Hey, this fight has just started. We're going to see you in the picket lines. We're going to see you in delegations. We're going to see you in the streets. Thank you very much for being here.